Hello everyone and welcome to Dwayne and Nydia's Kitchen. As you can see, I'm talking and I think you can hear me because I'm wearing a mic, but because I forgot to plug the mic in, you are now hearing me in voiceover mode. So I think we can do this with a voiceover. I am about to show you how to make, and you can almost guess by looking at all of the ingredients, we're going to be making a shrimp and crawfish etouffee. So yes, this Portuguese girl is going Cajun. As you can see, I'm going to go over all the different ingredients, but it starts with the Holy Trinity, as they call it in Louisiana, of celery, bell pepper, and onion. In addition, you will need some Cajun and or Creole spice. I use two different brands, one from McCormick and one from Zatarain's. There you see the bottles. And I use them both because I actually like the flavors a little bit different in each. You will not need salt because both of them have salt as part of the spice mix. Next up, you will definitely be using some hot sauce. And here I have the actual real Louisiana New Orleans favorite, Crystals, and of course my Portuguese household Nydia from the Azores, Red Hot from Frank's, which is also a Louisiana hot sauce made with cayenne. You'll need a bit of chicken broth because we use that to provide some moisture. And of course, this is about a pound of crawfish. Real Louisiana crawfish, just the tails of course, because that's really the only part you can eat. And I bought it already packaged and shelled. I think I got it at Walmart, but I know that they have the same brand at Stop and Shop. So it's locally available, and yes, it is frozen when you buy it. In addition, I do have 2 pounds of, again, frozen shrimp. And during the cooking process, when I'm at the stove, I'll be talking a little about what it's like to cook with frozen seafood because it can get waterlogged. So what I did was when I had everything thaw and I went through and cleaned my shrimp and took off the tails, I retained a lot of that water that was left behind after the seafood thawed. And then I put the water or all that seafood liquid in a little dish because I will mix it with the chicken broth to add the moisture. There it is. That is the seafood broth or the shrimp and crawfish broth that was left over in the bags after I put it through a strainer and after they were both thawed. That's how I added the moisture to the etouffee. Okay, next up, I'm going to be reaching pretty soon, I think, for that blue can that I see right in front of me, and that is the tomato element. I used canned petite tomatoes, and I'll show you the brand. I think it's the Walmart brand in a minute, but you can also use fresh tomatoes, Marzano tomatoes, or any tomato that you dice up. I just happened to buy the diced petite tomatoes for this particular recipe. That's the 30-ounce can because I'm working with over 3 pounds of seafood for this recipe. And again, that is the broth. And I have 2 sticks of butter. It may seem like a lot, but I am making a lot of etouffee. And that's what you need to make shrimp and crawfish etouffee. We're just about ready to get started. So in just a minute, I will meet you at my stove. I am here at the stove. I am putting the stove, this burner here. Notice the pan that I'm using. It has nice deep sides because I do have about 3 pounds or so of seafood that I'm going to be using for this etouffee. So first thing I'm going to do is take the butter. I have about 1.5 sticks of butter here. If you're only making a batch for one meal or one dinner, maybe 1 pound, maybe 2 total of seafood, you won't need that much butter. You can certainly adjust the amount of butter for your dietary needs. It's not, you do want a buttery flavor, but it doesn't have to be butter overload, and you don't have to turn this into some big fatty, fatty exercise in a meal. So I'm going to let this butter very quickly melt. And I might as well mention it because you've probably just seen it, but I totally forgot to put the mic on during my introduction to the ingredients. So I hope the voiceover that I do put in during the editing process is clear enough so that you understand exactly what you need in order to be able to make this dish. I will be saying what I'm putting in this pan every time I enter a new element or food into the pan. The first thing I'm going to do after this butter melts is put in my onion, followed by my bell pepper, and lastly, my celery. These three ingredients, the onion, the bell pepper, and the celery, those are the first three ingredients and the main core of a number of Cajun and Creole dishes. Whether you're making etouffee, gumbo, or jambalaya, they all start with the onion, bell pepper, and celery mix. The differences between those three dishes is that the etouffee is more of a thick consistency, served with rice typically for the most part. The gumbo is more of a stew, soupy consistency. And of course, jambalaya, in my mind, is almost like a Cajun or Creole paella. So, as you can see, the butter is just about melted down. I'm going to lower a little bit. I have it on medium-low, and I am going to give it a swirl so that it melts a little faster. And this is good enough for me to be able to go ahead and put the onion here. And next, I will add the bell pepper. Notice, no green. It's not my thing. I love the yellow, the orange, and the red bell pepper. I'm not a fan of the green. You can certainly use any bell pepper, green included, if you're making this dish. In fact, I've had it in restaurants, and it's fine. I just prefer the other peppers. They're a little more sweet in my mind. Lastly, the celery. I didn't mention before, I will mention now, we use equal amounts of each of these three ingredients. So you want the same amount of onion as you do bell pepper and celery. The ratio should be the same. This is so beautiful when you put it. And I have to give a shout out here. Look how beautifully diced and uniform these veggies are. And I have to thank Dwayne for that, because I don't have the patience, but he does. He is the master dicer and chopper in this home. And thank you. He's in the background over there, so he knows that I appreciate his dicing skills. Here we go. This is going to get all nice and cooked down. I'm going to stir it a little bit, and as it sweats down and cooks down, it'll be infused with that melted butter. And when it is, I will be back to show you the next steps. Well, this is certainly starting to cook down. It's looking beautiful, and it's not going to take too long before it's ready to get to the next step, which involves putting in the tomato. But you definitely want to make sure that everything is cooked. So the celery can't be hard and crunchy. The bell pepper can't be, raw. Everything has to be cooked down. So it does take a little while, but not bad. And it's oh so beautiful. As I mentioned before, or as I maybe mentioned but you couldn't hear, and I might forget to say this in my voiceover, this isn't the traditional way to make an etouffee. Typically people who make it the traditional way, especially down south in Louisiana, in the New Orleans area, they make a stock of a seafood stock made of shrimp shells and other things. And because I'm using frozen, the idea behind using frozen is, well, I don't want to add waterlogged seafood to my thickened roux and to my thickened gravy here that I'm making. So I very carefully thaw it, take the water out, and then I do pat down the shrimp and the seafood so that it's not holding on to excess water. The excess water that I took out of the shrimp, I did save because I want to use that with the stock to thicken this before adding the fish, or not fish, but before adding the seafood. And I'll show you that as soon as I'm ready for it. It is really really cooked down at this point. The onions are just about clear. It doesn't have to be completely clear because it still has to cook a little more. And it's definitely soft. You can tell when you use your spoon. And now what I'm going to do is add, and there's really not an exact measurement here. I'm going to add this petite diced tomato. It's so convenient to use these petite diced tomato canned products. I would estimate that I'm going to put in half of this 30-ounce or so can. You can add more, you can add less. I think one of the hallmarks of, you know, Cajun cooking, Creole cooking is kind of the same with a lot of ethnic cuisine. It's more about feel. How, you know, how do you feel it looks? How do you feel about this spice, that spice, this element? You don't have to be exact. And in fact, I find it more fun because every dish, even if you've made it before, is a slightly different adventure. So as I look at this, I realize I'm going to need to add more. I'm making this recipe today a little bigger. I'm going to add the whole can. By bigger, I mean I usually don't make as big a batch. I've only really made etouffee before, you know, maybe 4 servings or so. This is a lot bigger amount that I'm making here today, because I want to be able to share it. So yes, and this will continue to cook down a little bit. Some people like to do the roux, which is the addition of flour to thicken before they put the tomato in, but I actually like doing it once I put the tomato in because the tomato has liquid. So I want to make sure that I incorporate that liquid with the other vegetables in here. And then, as you can see, it's still quite buttery. The color is looking beautiful. Let this cook down for just another minute, and I'll be back to create that roux to thicken this before adding some moisture back in with the broth and with the fish broth, with the fish broth and the chicken broth. So as you can see, the consistency is a lot thinner now, and it will be time for us to thicken. But before thickening, I usually like to add some of that Cajun spice blend now, and then I will do it again at the end. I'm going to use, this has been a favorite. It's actually the McCormick Cajun seasoning. You can mix, as I mentioned, or maybe I haven't mentioned, but you can mix your own Cajun seasons. It's really only a blend of salt, black pepper, paprika, thyme, and a couple of other things like onion powder, not onion powder, garlic powder, I believe. And it's just easier and far more convenient to buy the Cajun blend. You'll notice I'm not using any salt because these Cajun seasoning blends already have salt in them. And if you like bold flavors, go to town with either the Cajun or the Creole. I'm going to use a little of both because they're both a little different and I enjoy them both. And now you can see it's a viscous consistency, but it's not really thick, and all of this butter is really necessary. And I'm not a big fancy roux person. I'm certainly not a trained chef of any type or sort. I work in healthcare, so I couldn't be further from. But this will thicken, and it's really about thickening. You want to thicken this up. You want that butter and that flour. Usually people make the roux sometimes with just the butter and the flour, but I think I was talking to someone from Louisiana who said, you know, there's the traditional way, and then there's, you know, life. And she likes to be able to put things together quickly like I do. And, you know, it's very convenient, like, to just do it this way. It will thicken it just the same. Of course, it probably won't taste like someone's been slaving over the stove making a delicious etouffee for hours. But let me tell you, this is going to hit the spot. And if you try this recipe, let me know. Just as a reminder, I think it was probably maybe a little earlier, maybe a month back or so, we also posted a video for Dwayne's gumbo. So as you can see, we've been pretty inspired by our recent trip to New Orleans. Here we go. See how it's thickened? It's become a thickened mass of veggies and tomatoes. I can smell some of the spices, but I know me. You should probably go slow and taste, or if you're like me and you prefer the bold, go to town with your Cajun spice. Okay, we're going to be reincorporating some liquid and putting some hot sauce and a few other things here. The absolute last thing that goes in here is the seafood for obvious reasons. So it is time for me to add a couple of dashes of hot sauce. Here's the real New Orleans crystals. This is an extra hot one. I'm not going to use a lot of that. I'm going to actually add a few dabbles of the Franks, and I'm also not going to overdo it because I want to share this with people and I don't want to scare them off. I'm going to add a little bit, about a cup of chicken broth, and this isn't quite half a cup, but it is the water that I got from the crawfish and from the shrimp. So as you can see, it's now re-moisturizing. Is that a word? Yes, but I think it's about skin, not about a thickened sauce. So you can see that I've reintroduced some liquid back in here. Sizzling away, it's looking beautiful. Does look like it needs a little bit more. Typically, you know, around 2 cups total of, here we go, around 2 cups total of the broth and fish liquid. That's kind of the stock you can see here now. And it's sizzling away. It really does sizzle away at a high temperature at this point, and it further breaks down the celery, onion, and bell pepper mixture. Okay, we're going to let this simmer for at least another 10 minutes or so, and when we return, it'll be time to put in our seafood. So you can see it's really breaking down that entire mix of veggies. This is what the consistency is looking like, and it's really smelling awesome, and everything is breaking down. In fact, this has been simmering now for about 6 or 7 minutes in total. One thing about seafood is because it cooks so fast, I typically turn off the heat and then add the shrimp, and that way it will cook in the residual heat of both the pan and the sauce, and that way you will probably not overcook your shrimp, because nothing is worse than putting some delicious shrimp in a pot or in a pan and just cooking it until it turns to rubber, and it happens so easy. So even when I make my shrimp Mozambique or any other shrimp dish, I don't put it into a searing, burning, flaming pan at all. And in fact, this is boiling. It's simmering and boiling away. And in total, it'll have boiled at this level after you have added all the ingredients for about 10 minutes. This is hot. So you don't need that heat. When I add the shrimp, you'll see that I'm just going to add it to this, and then you'll see what it looks like. Okay, I am turning off the flame. This has been simmering for about 10 minutes. Everything is soft. It smells amazing. It's at this point that I will be adding my uncooked 2 pounds of, these are, I believe, extra large size shrimp, and they are cleaned with no tails. You don't want anything crunchy or chewy, crunchy in your etouffee. You want to be able to just, here we go, and it will cook in this heat, or at least it should. If it doesn't, I'll turn the heat back on, but I'm pretty sure it'll be fine. Now, I'm not even positive if this, which is the crawfish, is cooked or not. It might not be. I'm not sure. But like the shrimp, I don't want to overcook it. It's so small, it's so delicate. I don't want it to get rubbery. So I'm putting the shrimp in first. As you can see, the shrimp is cooking in this hot, stewy. Looks good. Turning white. Well, not white, its translucency is disappearing and it's becoming the normal shrimp color and consistency now. And let me just leave it in here without moving it too much for a second and let it kind of cook up. And in about a minute, I'm going to add the crawfish. And just as I thought, the shrimp is cooked. It only really took a minute or two. I am adding, as you can see, the crawfish tails. Let me incorporate the crawfish into everything else that's in here. The veggies, the shrimp, the crawfish. I don't have the heat on. You can see it really looks like, you know, the etouffees that I ate at restaurants in New Orleans. It looked a lot like this, and at least when I've tasted my version, it tasted a lot like it too. Your mileage may vary, but give the recipe a try. If you like seafood, and if you like, in particular, you know, Cajun and Creole cooking, give this one a try. At this point, it's a good idea to do a final tasting, because now you've put the seafood in, and this would be the time where you can decide whether or not it needs any additional seasoning. I am going to, oh gosh, this one's not even open. So I'm going to have to open this container if I want to use a splash of the zatarains, which is the famous zatarains. Let's just put a little bit. Haven't even tasted, but I always add a little. So this is when you'd want to add any final seasonings, especially hot sauce. Now remember, the Cajun seasoning comes with both black pepper, and some of the mixes have black and white. It does have paprika and thyme. So it's already a little spicy to begin with, so you don't want to overdo it with the hot sauce. Everyone has a different tolerance level for spice. So this is my suggestion. Taste it now, and then after you taste it, decide if it needs more of this, okay? I think this is going to be all set. I'm going to have my husband try it. I'm actually going to plate it up and show you how we typically serve it. Okay, so what I typically do is I serve the etouffee with rice. This is about a half cup of dirty rice. You've probably seen it in the stores, or you could use plain white rice, jasmine rice, or even any of the aromatic rices. And what I'm going to do is I am going to put the etouffee with the crawfish and the shrimp all around it. And this is the way it's typically served, like this. So there you have it. This is Louisiana, New Orleans style shrimp and crawfish etouffee. Oh, it smells amazing. Again, thank you, and look for more videos for both our travel adventures as well as our adventures in the kitchen. This is Dwayne and Nidia, Food, Travel, and Fun. And if you like what you've seen, please subscribe, hit that like button, and we'll catch you in the future. Thank you all so much.